Well, hello again, everybody, and I'm glad so many of you have been able to stay on board with us. Hope you've got a coffee and whatever is needed, although you're not going to need coffee with our next host, Kenny Deery, to keep you awake and alive through this session. Fascinating topic and a vibrant, ebullient man to present it. So, Ken, we're having a discussion on culture and age-friendly towns next. You've seen the challenge ahead, an enormous amount of questions and comments coming in the chat box to be prepared for as well. So over to you. We look forward to this.
Lovely, Ian, and thank you very much. Good afternoon, all from the West. I'm not sure about those introductions. I think you can take them with a grain of salt. But no, delighted to be part of this session. It's something really important. And as Ian said, we're focusing on culture and age-friendly design. And this really, to get to the core of it, is about helping local economies begin to thrive again and learning from each other so that we can expedite progress. And more of that in a second. My name is Kenny Deery, CEO of Galway Chamber, and I'm very excited about this conversation because I do believe the learnings from our contributors today will be really powerful in helping each of us in our own locations as we look to deliver on our own plans. And Lord knows we have enough plans. So I think through a local lens, we have huge ambitions for a sustainably transitioned Galway, a Galway of the future. We're a medieval city coalescing with the Corrib and the Atlantic. That's a huge opportunity, but it also throws up challenges. Where we talk about culture, we're a European capital of culture, and just coming off the back of that, and that has been and will continue to be very powerful for us as a location, because that's a significant achievement in terms of the bid, the pitch, the work that had to take place. Collaboration has been mentioned a lot, and to be fair, that would never have happened without collaboration. It's fair to say, though, that many locations have what I call plan fatigue, and we need to give effect to delivery on our ambitions under these headings. And I think now, let's go to those who have given effect to delivery and have agreed to share their experiences with us. So I'm delighted to be joined by the following trio. We have Paul McGuirk, who is Head of Enterprise at the Local Enterprise Office in Cork City. Paul has over 2 decades experience in local economic development. He's a great collaborator and has been clearly a central cog in the wheel of the relationship building that has enabled Cork to do a lot of work in this space. Following on from Paul, we'll talk to Margaret O'Brien, and Margaret is CEO of Ennis Chamber and a great colleague in the Chambers Ireland network. It's fair to say Margaret has her fingers in many pies, and those of us who would be part of the CEO calls are well aware of that. But recently she's coordinated the Ennis Strain Art Project, which sounds a fascinating project, and I know she's going to talk to us more about in a moment. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from Aaron Copeland. And Aaron is creative director of an organization called A Playful City, really fascinating organization. And his focus is on creating more fun and engaged communities. And I know Aaron and his colleagues have been recognized recently in the Irish Architecture Awards for their work. So we really look forward to that session and that conversation too. I want this to be as interactive as possible, so I'm going to ask each of our 3 speakers to talk a little to their own roles in organisations and how they've been impactful in helping to represent or reimagine their urban centres. And for those of you watching, please use, as you have already, use the Q&A function as we go through the session. Some questions have come in advance, and I welcome more from those on the line as part of this session. And we will be wrapping up and handing back to Ian at 3:45. I'm under strict instructions. So we're starting in Cork with Paul.
Hello, Kenny.
Yeah, perfect. Here you are.
Apologies, it just froze me right as you came over to me. Right, apologies. Kenny, I decided not to use a slide deck. We just talk informally. As you mentioned earlier, I work with the Local Enterprise Office for the last couple of years, but previous to that, I worked as a city centre coordinator for Cork City since about 2015 to 2019. And that came about through a city centre strategy, talk about plans, I suppose, and where they get delivered. I suppose in 2015, the council with its partners published a city centre strategy, and there was a couple of recommendations out of that. One would that there would be a city centre coordinator, and the second would that there would be a city centre partnership established, and both those were implemented. And I suppose I'm briefly going to talk about 4 Ps, not the 4 marketing Ps, but I suppose 4 Ps that I think have helped over the years to develop some success over the last few years in terms of animating our city centre. The first is partnerships. I suppose I mentioned the main partnership we have. I'm a big believer in that old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we've had a city centre partnership since, as I said, 2015. The Cork Chamber is a partner. Some of the transport organisations like Bus Air and Irish Rail is chaired by the chief exec of the council, with hospitality and business involved in tourism. And that came as a recommendation. And also we've got partnerships at a very street or neighbourhood level. People living and working on the street know the pulse of the street. I think it was mentioned earlier. So it's very important that they're involved. So we have that, I suppose, citywide, and I said that local level partnership involved. And then also other partnerships like Healthy Cities and Playful Paradigm that really help to kind of when it gets to implementation. The second P is a placemaking fund. So I suppose the council has set aside 1% of its rates for I think about 10 years at least into an economic development fund, and part of that is set aside for a city development fund. For a city centre fund. I know I'm going to talk about things that cost money now, but when I talk about it later on, it'll be low cost stuff. So we set aside a portion of that for a placemaking fund in 2018. Sorry. So we put a call out to the public, looking for ideas really around tactical urbanism, as Marion and Sharon were talking about earlier. So we were really looking for ideas. Had to be comfort. The cause needed to be from applications, need to be from community groups or business organisations. And we were guiding things like creative events, parklets. We were really looking to trial a parklet. And I'll come on to trials and pilots later on as well. And we were looking for some high-level street art. Cork had a lot of street art at an eye level, but really, I've always been a big fan of the Walls project, the Waterford Walls project in Waterford. So we were looking for some high-end, large-scale gable end street art. So, and the other one was on creative lighting. So we put the call out, and we got a lot of subscriptions, and as a result of that, so we got the first parklet that went in, and that went into in a particular street with a street organisation in Douglas Street. So that was trialed for 3 months, and it's 2 years later, it's still there. And as a result of the success of the pilot pre-COVID, we were able to roll out 11 more parklets during COVID. We put a call out for parklet partners, again, beginning that whole partnership. So we commissioned a local social enterprise called Bench Space here, which is a co-making space as opposed to a co-working space. So they've built 11 of those, and we've got partners for all of those. So the easy bit is, not easy, but I suppose the easier bit is building the parklet. Then you need somebody to maintain it on a day-to-day basis. So we've got partners, or it could be a coffee shop, it could be a cultural organisation, and they can. It's in a parking space in front of their premises. And mainly it takes up 2 parking spaces, and it's nice seating, planting, pollinator friendly. And I suppose even those 11 now, we've put a call out for 6 more yesterday in the suburbs. So we'll end up with 17 or 18 parklets really around the city, which is great. And again, it just feeds into a whole lot of, we're talking about age friendly. There's seating there, there's bike parking there. The best of materials are put into it, and again, it provides local employment as well because they're all built locally. The third P is play. It's been mentioned earlier, and I know we talked about it later on with some of our other presenters here. We were looking in Cork, we have a thing called A Playful Paradigm. It's led by Healthy Cities. It's a European project, and it's now been, I suppose, trying to spread the good practice around the country fairly recently. So that's again about introducing play into the city and trying to create, there is a playful strategy. So again, some very simple things, low cost things that were involved there. I would always say to people, don't underestimate the power of chalk. They've done things like get an artist in, just do an outline of, obviously you couldn't do it on a day like today, but do chalk outlines of some sea creatures or whatever the theme might be, and really popular among families and children coming in colouring in those things. Old games like tug of war, giant Jenga, giant Connect 4, all those kind of things. So again, I'll come on to that in our next one, which is really, and it's not just for young people. We've done other simple things like treasure hunts, where every town and city has some feature. So in Cork here, we have a lot of clocks, for example, old clocks, new clocks. So we took some pictures of those and put those into postcard size and got people, ran a competition. People get to go around their city or town centre and look for those. And we've done that in other things where again, a lot of towns and cities have really good architecture, but people don't tend to look up. So they tend to look at the phone or look at the shop level. So we would again take photographs of the tops of buildings, some old Victorian architecture, Georgian architecture, whatever. And again, it got people really animated, going around the cities, young and old. So they're the kind of simple things that I would say that are doable by any town or city. And the last P is pilot. The parklets I spoke about, they don't happen by accident. So there's an international day called Parking Day. Okay, people aren't familiar with it. I know it takes place in Dublin as well, where it's usually the third Friday in September. So it's Parking Day, it's play on the word. So you convert a parking space or parking spaces into a park for the day. So people come up with all kinds of solutions for that. So for 3 years, 2016 to 18, we tried that in a few spots. And the place where the permanent parklet went in, it proved really popular. So again, because we had that pilot or that trial over those 3 years, we'd learned from that and we put that in place. And there were whenever you try something new, there were all kinds of challenges or obstacles. Usually, given it Ireland, insurance and health and safety are normally the first thing. So you have to have those ducks in a row and risk assessments and all that. But all that is doable where there's a good partnership on board. And I suppose I go back to, we're looking to say fairly recently, we were able to pedestrianise permanently 17 city centre streets. Again, that was trialled last summer during COVID. And I think, again, that happened because of the partnerships that were built up at a citywide level and a local level with the Chamber and the transport organisations and the local communities. And again, I keep going back to that if you invest in that time, the earlier speakers were talking about consultation. So if you invest in those relationships in that time, I think it's a lot easier to roll out things like that then. So they're my 4 Ps. Okay, thank you.
Wow, well, certainly 4 Ps, but there's a lot of work and energy behind that. And I think in an observation, probably because you had the ambition, you were doing a lot of this before we ever heard of COVID. That really has been a springboard for the success that you've been able to achieve now. And I know we'll come back to that. But for now, I'm going to head a little further up the West Coast and go to Margaret O'Brien now in Ennis. So Margaret, over to you from a perspective of Ennis and the work that you've been doing under this heading.
Okay, hi Kenny. So I came on board into a role that was co-funded by Ennis Municipal District and Ennis Chamber to coordinate festivals in Ennis. And I think now that was such a privileged way to come into my life in the Chamber. I later became full-time because it started with a collaboration. And from day one, I looked at the people I worked in the council as my colleagues, as much as I looked at the people in the Chamber as my colleagues. And I think the days of them and us have gone largely in Ennis. And that doesn't mean if the businesses don't have a gripe that I have to raise my hand and fight for it, but it's done in a more collaborative way. And, I think that the room is always open to discussion. And that's really helped. And I suppose my role when I came in first was to work with what were supported, as in financially supported festivals in Ennis, to make sure that there was transparency there, that there was good governance, that they were professionalised. And I also went swirling around for a bit of extra money for them. So if they hadn't thought about particular grants, I helped them along with that. And then my other role was to coordinate the Purple Flag. And I was to sit on a group called Promote Ennis, which again is a partnership to promote the town between Ennis Chamber and Ennis Municipal District as part of Clare County Council. So those 3 different areas brought me in touch with such a wide reach of agencies and business people in the town. So it kind of became second nature to know what was going on. I was sitting down at a table one day with Civil Defence and the HSE on the Purple Flag and the Guards. And the next day then I was looking at people who were volunteers primarily, a lot of them, doing their best to organise festivals. The Purple Flag I found really interesting because it introduced me to the whole concept of place. And I really grasped it. I attended some fantastic conferences in the UK organised by the ATCM. And within that, we all kind of sit there at a conference and we identify something that relates particularly to your town. The time hadn't really come, but the one thing that I did relate to was I thought, our businesses imagined what their competitors were, a shopping centre in Limerick or, whatever it was. But in actual fact, we needed to create experiences for children in our town, because children don't come into town on their own. They bring their parents and they bring their grandparents. So that was important to us. And we looked at how, give me an idea to look at that whole area. So look, I was, toddling along, doing lots of things, and I had to create a new festival as well, which for us was Clare Food and Drink Fla, which launched in 2019. And then COVID hit. And this is where the collaborations really came into their own. So initially, in conjunction with the local radio station, Clare FM, we organised a survey through Ennis Chamber to question the businesses around Clare, very general topics, but then there was a small section which was basically confined to the businesses in Ennis town centre. And the key question was, will we need to pedestrianise the main streets of Ennis to accommodate social distancing? And 71% of the respondents said yes. So about a week after that, a mobility plan task force was put together. And I think, in fairness, Clare County Council were probably, Ennis Municipal District were the first municipal district out of the blocks to have a working mobility plan. So it's a large multi-agency group. And really out of that, some great ideas came. And, we all seem to think about COVID as being such a dire time, but it also was an incredible time of creativity. And we may look back on it, so creativity and change. But the mobility plan, we were looking at things like, so from those early days when you could do click and collect, we had dedicated click and collect car parking spaces, which were basically like 15-minute free. Come in, set your car down, collect what you wanted to collect at the shops. They were nearest to the town centre. We now had our pedestrianised streets from 11 until 6. So we looked at priority parking. So although people in Ennis thought it was for the parish priest when they saw PP written down, I don't think we'd have that many parish priests in Ennis anymore, but that was quite funny for the first 2 weeks. Like, we actually had queries in like, why do you think there's so many parish priests, or why did they need a space outside Tesco? So so once that was resolved, that PP stood for priority parking, that was better understood. And again, we really tried to encourage the business people to organise appointments for older people pre-11. So they could drive their car in and they could have their hair done or whatever they needed done, or go to the pharmacy before 11 o'clock. It also was a time when we were able to work together as a group to go after grants, which is really important. So, we were able to through the Ennis Municipal District, and we certainly helped out on this to, look at funding for retractable bollards, which are now in place. Might be the sexiest thing in the world, but they'll have their day. And then to look at the technology that went with that, so the apps for opening and closing that could be, worked by the truck drivers or whoever, and they can all come in and out of Ennis early in the morning when they're up and running. So there was a lot of difficulty. I can't pretend there wasn't. There's always a backlash, and there was a backlash in Ennis to pedestrianisation. As I say, it was in our two main streets, and the third street, Parnell Street, was already pedestrianised for many years. So there were issues, but I think that, having with our own members, it was incredible for me to see the soft turnaround in attitude. So people who, Christmas before, when pedestrianisation would come in seasonally, would be on the phone to me saying, hey, my tills aren't ringing. Can you call the council and open up the streets again, or something like that? A few months in, we're thinking, this isn't too bad. And we also encouraged our businesses to talk to their own customers. So to do very simple surveys, not public. This is about themselves, their relationship with their own customers. And some of them were just amazed by how popular pedestrianisation was with their customers. And that has really helped them to shift their opinion.
And Margaret, in terms of that, can I ask you, sorry to cut across you, but can I ask you about the drainage art piece just as a specific project?
I will. So can I just say one thing, though? We're continuing our pedestrianisation until September, which I see is a great little victory for Ennis recently. So at least with that. With the drain art piece, so going back to kind of the need to bring children into town, the whole point there was to try to come up with some cheap and simple ideas. So for that one, it came out of our retail group. We were trying to brainstorm to think what could we come up with, and somebody'd seen some really beautiful art that was done on the street in Japan on manholes. So we took it a step further. I commissioned some artists to create cartoon-like characters, which basically wrapped around the storm drains or the manholes in Ennis, and we have 10 in total. So we've built a very nice little trail, and you know, the feedback has been incredible from the children, not just children, teenagers. You know, the amount of teenagers that stop in groups and go, oh, that's really cool. So it's great to see that, and it's great to see the response that it's had. And you know, it really has kind of provided a lift for the town and a great talking point for a while. And I think that we are going to show a short video of the drain art. I don't know if Emma is ready there to show it, but if we could, that would be great. And with that, Kenny, I don't know if you want me to talk about the funding for that.
No, well, what we can do is just hang on for a moment. I'd say what we'll do is go to Aaron next and give him a time to tee up the video. And I think one of the fascinating bits about your project is that it's using manhole covers and gutters and parts of a town or city that we look at and you think there's nothing you could do about it, but it's been totally reimagined. Heading towards Dublin, Aaron, this is a space that you are very heavily involved in, and please talk us through your perspective on this.
Hello, Kenny. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Paul and Margaret. That was wonderful. Margaret, I've been following those manhole covers on Twitter for the last while, and I love them. So congratulations on that, and Paul on the marina and the pedestrianisation of that. It's just been spectacular to see the Playful Paradigm really working so well in Cork. It's always so assuring to know there's such great people out there. I was going to share my screen, Kenny, if that's okay. I find showing and telling is often a good way to get across what I'm doing.
I certainly don't have an issue anyways. Is Michaela able to make you co-host?
Yeah, I'm done. Okay, so we're A Playful City, and we're very interested in the intersection, if you like, in the design of public spaces around children, the city, and play. And we want to really make cities places where this is not an unusual word to hear, and it's most certainly not an unusual word to hear throughout the streets. And it all started with my involvement with Granby Park, which was a public park we built between the times that one flats complex had been knocked, and it's since been rebuilt 10 years later off Parnell Street. And it was the realization after working for a year with teenagers from the local area who had been living in those flats, and then teenagers, as you can see, the architecture is a little familiar of the July 12th bonfires in Belfast, working with teenagers for the year, and then having loads of downtime in the project, that we actually started building a playground as well. And it was the playground that really sparked something in me, who would just myself and my wife had just had our first boy, and it was how play incorporated into public space in a way that's subtle and fluid and not fenced from a lot of places, can actually really bring a dimension an atmosphere into an area that is incredibly peaceful and wonderful to be around. And I was shocked at that, how putting play at the center of towns was so fundamentally important to the success of a particular space. And so it kind of always sparks this question in me. It's this idea of that are children people? I think we can all agree that they are, but we design our spaces as if they're not. And in fact, one of the things we're interested in is this idea of the child, the city, and the play, and then the concept of child, play, and playful. And that's a real slippery topic for anybody who's tried to explore it. And then how that all intersects with physical urban space. And I suppose the big question is why are we doing this? And as a parent, that's how I experience most towns in Ireland, most towns across the world that don't have people outside cars is their priority. And so if you have a 50k speed limit in your town, that's the equivalent drop of a 3-story building. So you're literally asking families to come into your town to do the shopping and ask them to experience the fear of God if they let their child go. So what's the solution been to that? And we'll look at that in a sec, but there's 1 in 5 people in Ireland today are under 15. And so that's over 1 million people. And when it comes to inner city Dublin, where we do an awful lot of our work, there's inner city Dublin has 17,510 children under 15. 47% of those live in North Dublin, where we do most of our work. Out of the 60 playgrounds in the inner city, there's only a small percentage of those that are actually open in the public realm to anybody outside the public buildings that are that have designated play areas to children. And that amounts to, there's 3 small football pitches to serve 8,000 children in North Dublin at the moment. And in the global sense, we're talking about 3 in 5 of people living in cities are going to be children by 2030. So if you can imagine that, we're all talking about how do we make our towns, how do we make our cities sustainable? Well, we would argue that you design it for the youngest residents. And so when we talk about designing for the youngest residents, we talk about reliable mobility choices, space on footpaths, which is vital, places to pause, places to socially interact, places where visibility is important, places that's safe, and we're talking about pollution as well as speeds, and we're talking about security, so passive surveillance, which is a factor that comes up an awful lot again, and of course play. And when we talk about children, we don't just talk about children as 6-year-olds or 13-year-olds, we mean their carers, we mean the different needs of children in relation to every phase of their life. And you can see that there's a whole range of different needs that are set out for that over those 1 million people living in Ireland today. And we'd argue that ultimately the goal of A Playful City is to turn playgrounds inside out, so that we're not shunting people away off streets into places that we've designated as play. And so if you look at the way Dublin, an example of Dublin, we've seen play shrink to a matter from 10 kilometers to a matter of meters in the last 30 years. And so we're talking about from 70 GAA pitches in any direction to 3 for every child in Ireland living today, well, nearly all. And so what we've done is we've set out these play reservations, what we call playgrounds, when in fact they're often built on the edges of towns, and we're actually taking families out of the towns, and we're asking them to hang around in these pretty, and I'm sorry, this isn't a rant against playgrounds, but it is asking people to consider what it is we expect people to do in these play areas for an hour and a half in terms of the physical needs of children on a daily level. And I don't know if anybody spent 2 hours in a playground. It's pretty grueling if you're a parent. And so what we've done is we've gradually designed children out of public space by default. And it's not just children, it's their families. And so we see that everywhere in Dublin. We have Ormond Square, which is a beautiful square in Dublin, home of Johnny Giles, and right over the plaque, no football games allowed. And one of the most common questions in apartment buildings is, how can I stop children playing in my complex? Even in Ormond Square, with the lovely playground it has, we're still talking about it's only available to those that are 3 and 12, and you have to be accompanied by an adult. And so there's no room, once you hit teenage years, there's no room to go according to the bylaws of most playgrounds in our areas. So we've moved, and you can even see that in road signs, we've moved from independent children in the last 30, 40 years to the dependent children on their parents, on their carers. We've moved from an era where play and children could choose their own, could do their own thing, to one that is supervised and essentially where we play by adult rules, whether that's supervised or coached. And so ultimately at the very heart of this is the issue of traffic. And so when we talk about children's play, we always have to consider traffic as a fundamental factor in children's play. It is actually we're locking up our children as a response to traffic. And so what we're doing in A Playful City is that we're trying to build a partnership of different organizations and different interested groups, from international players to national players to businesses and community organizations and advocacy groups that are all concerned with sustainable cities, in particular cities that put children as a priority in their design. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to talk about how do we actually make consultation areas that actually we can bring into towns, that we can reel into areas, that we can consult with children and their parents, and then hand those consultations to designers to design in ways that mightn't be the most expected way. So if you ask a child what they want in the play area, they'll say a swing, a slide, because they don't know anything else. But if you ask a child what it is the last thing that you heard that was pleasing to your ears, or what's your favorite taste off a tree, those kind of questions can really spark some really crazy answers. And so even we were lucky enough to bring Eduardo Santanderas, the CEO of the European Tourist Commission, and Margaret O'Brien. Loads of different people came to Dublin a few years back, and we've designed with those findings, and they've defined what A Playful City is. We've also set up a Playful Street, and for any town that wants a quick win, an easy win, a Playful Street or a Play Street is the first port of call. You can just closing the traffic to walking speed, or closing spaces off the traffic, bringing families into your towns is a really important thing for everybody's enjoyment. And chalk, I agree. And so there's also public art that we've worked on for the Ombudsman for the Child. And we're all about promoting not just freedom to play, but the right of children to play. And we've developed curriculums where children design streets, wonky football pitches that cross over roads, cinemas that cross over the road, so the audience is on one side and the cinema screen is on the other, and cars actually have to drive through the cinema screen. And it makes drivers feel how fast they're going, how intrusive and hostile driving vehicles through town spaces can be, considering they're the weight of an entire rugby team, each and every one of those cars. And we've designed spaces with children. This was designed with Sheriff Street, which was a lounge area for the children who swim in the canal. It was also a place where they could hang their wetsuits, and it also took them away from the apartment buildings on the other side of the canal, where they were getting into trouble with the local residents, and that was leading to trouble with the Gardaí. So
those visuals are very powerful, Aaron. And I remember one of the comments that you mentioned when we were speaking before this. You used a wonderful analogy about comparing children in a city to being like salmon in a freshwater or in a river, and the fact that it's a really healthy sign. And I think it was from one of the earlier sessions we heard from Kildare, where they had begun work on a street, and all of a sudden it was a magnet to draw children into play, which always is a sign that you're on the right step. And listen, thank you. I could listen to you all day, Aaron, from a point of view of the imagery and the experience and what you've done. But unfortunately, time is against us, and I want to get into a kind of a quick fire round of just some questions, and I've one or two back for yourself, Aaron. But Paul, one of the pieces from a Cork point of view, and you talked about the Placemaking Fund, and you talked about that 1%. Would you mind just giving us a very quick sense of how that came about? Because many local authorities, you know, there's ambitions, and different towns and cities have ambitions to do things, but budgets do come up as being problematic. So maybe just talk us through how it is you managed to achieve that pot of funding that you're able to invest into these initiatives.
Yeah, as I say, I think it was probably 10 years ago anyway, the council made a decision to set aside 1% of its rate space for economic development. So that's to prime various economic projects. And then a percentage of that, portion of that is set aside for a city centre fund that started when I started in, say, 2015. So that's how that comes about. And then we decide every year how to use that. You know, it can be to prime certain projects. People come to us with proposals. And I suppose then in 2018-19, we created a placemaking fund, which was again to try and prime certain projects and to, I suppose, develop things a bit further that we were trying to enhance.
And it was probably, you had some quick wins which justified the spend as well, because I could imagine some elected representatives having questions around it. So I'm assuming that was part of the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything, you go with the low-hanging fruit first, and you build up a bit of traction and a bit of momentum around it. But to be honest, there was, I suppose, great, publicity around it. And I suppose it was the thing about tactical algorithms, those kind of things. It's very visual. You know, all those pictures that Aaron just showed there, or the drain act. You know, you see the impact, and it's the simple things. People want the simple things. You know.
Very good. And coming back to the drain art, Margaret, from a point of view of funding, I know you started with a very small budget. Just in 60 seconds, if you could take us through how you were able to leverage that up.
Well, we didn't really. We started with a small budget and we stayed with a small budget. So, I mean, what happened here is we usually try to stay away from the Arts Office. So we went to Creative Ireland to look for some funding from Creative Ireland, and we put it out to tender amongst artists. We had an idea of what we wanted. They came back with ideas. We decided which one we wanted to work with. Like basically when we're squirreling around for small projects like this, like we have a mural project going on at the moment, we go to elected members and ask them, will they give us some of their discretionary spend, some of their discretionary money, and they do. And I think that's a great turning point for us, that they want to be associated now with murals or something on the street, because it's highly visible and it's attractive to families. So, you know, they're now reaching into their pocket and helping us out with that. So to give you an idea, the Drain Art project cost a total of €5,000.
Wow. And we're all talking about it, and it's got national coverage as something.
And international coverage.
Absolutely. And that's what's really powerful. And I know both Paul and Aaron talked about chalk as well, and the impactfulness of it. Aaron, coming back to yourself, you talked about cars, and I know it's something you're passionate about in terms of the interplay between car-centric cities and people-centric cities or towns. And this is something that everyone's grappling with. And I know in conversation you talked about maybe getting cars to a point. How do we do that? What in your sense, let's say, how do we work with the communities, with the business community, with the local authorities, and try and really layer into that so that we don't just admire the problem and talk about it, but we're able actually to bring some change?
It's a good question, because I don't think anybody really understands fully how they might do that. It's a combination of things. It's enforcement, it's street design, it's speed limits. Interestingly, Dublin City is talking about their 30-kilometer speed limit today, I've noticed. And I think personally, I think one of the ways that we can get people to think about the way they drive is to look at the impact that's having on children's play, and looking at how that pretty much all the studies are suggesting that, barring broken glass, kidnapping, traffic is actually the main reason as to why children aren't allowed out and play. It's why we have 4 out of 5 children in Ireland not getting enough physical activity, 1 in 4 overweight or obese, most children spending more time indoors than prisoners in maximum security prisons, all to serve the convenience of adults, us. And I'm kind of just intolerant of it, to be honest. Now, I appreciate that there are a significant group of people that need their car. We're coming at it from a Dublin perspective in the city centre, but at the very least, we're talking speed limits and street designs. You wouldn't hesitate for a second to come into one of those box malls of the Woodies, the whatever, all those big shops, and spend hours walking from a car parks outside those shops. Same with shopping centres. And yet, when it comes to town centres, it seems that it's a huge issue that that people would have to walk longer than a few meters. Now, maybe that's simplifying it, but it's really coming from a child perspective, and what it's decimated children's play. And we've all experienced what that's like in the lockdown, what it feels like to be locked in. Children have been experiencing this slow creeping lockdown for 30, 40 years. So, sorry, I'm not sure if I answered your question there. But...
No, I think your answer illustrates that it's complex and there's no one quick win and quick solution, but it's about people trying and trying different things. And I think, Paul, coming back, I think you all talked about pilots in different ways. Paul, from a point of view of, and I encourage people, there's one or two questions in which I'm going to come to now in the chat box, but one question I'm interested in is the whole play-in concept and, or the park-in, should I say, concept. And I think it was from San Francisco that you got that at the time. Talk us through that in terms of, I suppose, what was behind the motivation of looking at that? Were you looking at other examples around the world? Why that one? And maybe flush it out in 60 or 90 seconds, just because it's something that I get a sense is very practical. We all have spaces within our urban centres at the moment that, you know what, you could allocate a couple of spaces, but what are the steps to try and get buy-in and actually do it?
Sure. I suppose, look, like anything, when you're trying to achieve something, you look internationally, what's best practice, what's out there. So came across that parklets, as I said, it started in San Francisco. So then we tried Parking Day, which I know, as I said, it's in Dublin as well. But, so again, we would have, because we had some relationships at a local level, the street level, with particular street organisations or businesses, we engaged with those that we knew were a bit, I suppose, forward thinking, and they trialed those. So that would be just, we give them a license for the day, they create whatever. So a flower shop might put AstroTurf, we might give them some AstroTurf barricade off. So that would trial it, and then we put in the permanent parklet. Put it in for a 3-month period, and it's permanently there now 2 years ago. And then I suppose the fact that you have a successful model like that, everybody sees that and wants it, and it plays hugely on social media. People take pictures of themselves on it. So now we have 11 more, and you know, they're all subscribed to the demand for us. But again, it's once you get the first one over the line, and you deal with all the issues that are there, like risk assessments and all that. Because the first time you do something, there's always challenges. You know, there was no such thing as a parklet license for us. You know, there was a public space license, an event license. We had to create one, but once you do it the first time, and again, the people demand it. Then people look for their own community. Why can't we have that? And that's what you look for.
You also managed to convince business owners to take responsibility for maintaining and upkeeping, let's say, and I think you said that you're oversubscribed nearly in terms of businesses looking to be responsible for looking after the spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a combination of business organizations and individual businesses. And again, it's part of the deal is that it's not just for your cafe. It has to be open to the public to sit down. So, you know, and that's why there's no, again, people, I suppose one of the things I would say about COVID, it's been one of the few positives is there's a big tailwind behind urbanism that wouldn't have been there a few years ago. We've all walked around our localities now and seen the benefit of just being able to walk around and use the space. So that fed into that as well for us.
Very, very good. There's a comment more than a question in, and I'm just going to open it up to any of you to comment on. If you design for the young, you exclude the old, but if you design for the old, you include everyone, making towns and villages age-friendly and more inclusive. Has anyone observations on that? Maybe Aaron, if I start with yourself.
Yeah, I suppose we always start in the opposite side.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things is not, when we're talking about playful design, it's not necessarily like swings and slides and really physical things. It's a safe environment. It's an environment that has different levels. It's an environment that children can be safely left to their own devices, and that there's, and sorry, when I talk about children, I am talking about teenagers too. But we'd advocate children first, even before pedestrians. Children are different to pedestrians. They have different needs. They move differently. They can't anticipate things the same way. They can't read. They can't see. Their visual development hasn't been such that they can actually read 50 kilometers of a car traveling towards them. They don't have that processing ability. So children's needs are very different. But it is important. We'd actually say that design for children, you design for everybody. But the point is, it's about inclusive design. And that's the key, is that we're inclusive so that you're not ignoring the needs of others. Very good. Paul, have you anything you'd add to that?
No, I think he said it all. I think it's if you design it for people, then it benefits everybody, really. You know, what's good for young people is good for older people. So yeah, I'd actually focus on the young person, and it benefits everybody.
Very good. Now, slightly moving to the other end of the age spectrum, Margaret, Ennis is up and have ambitions to be classified as an age-friendly town by the end of July. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so basically I'm on the age-friendly committee in Clare, and we're rolling out strategy. So obviously my focus is on the town and engaging with businesses. So we've had some workshops which are run through Chambers Ireland, and we had 37 businesses on the first workshop, and they're now tasked to come up with 3 actions that will make their business more attractive to older people. And some of the ideas are fantastic. Some of them are really simple. And then together with the age-friendly officer in Clare County Council, I'm working on some projects across the board. So, you know, it can be anything from, you know, a table and 2 chairs outside the front door of a shop to the hotels have got a load of glasses from Specsavers with, you know, +1, +2, or whatever, so people can read menus as they get older. Somebody else come up with an idea to just have a little holder at the side of all the tables for a walking stick. So, you know, and again, that stops a trip risk. So it's just the other idea as well, that you have to have a champion within each business. So when they tick those boxes that they've come up with 3 actions and they've got their champion, then, you know, they'll be entitled to have an age-friendly charter. So we hope to have the first 37 businesses signed up by the end of July. And I think then we have a number more in reserve who were sorry they didn't get on that first workshop. So they'll be coming on board straight afterwards. And yeah, it's just great.
Brilliant. Well, listen, the very best of luck with it, and we look forward to hearing the announcement at the end of July. Listen, folks, at this stage, we're just going to wrap up. We've just come on time at 3:45. And I just want to thank you all very much for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your sharing of ideas. I know the video of the project in Ennis is put into the link is put into the chat box, and you can look at it on Twitter yourself. But listen, it has been a really insightful session. I want to thank you all very much. And I think it's a case to watch this space over the coming 6, 12, 18 months. We're going to see more and more innovation in the core of our urban centres. So well done, everyone. And I'm handing you back to Ian Talbot. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks very much, Kenny, and everyone for contributing there. That was a fantastic session again. So now I'm delighted to welcome Anne-Marie Farrelly, who's the Chief Executive of Fingal County Council, who's joined us. Thanks very much indeed, Anne-Marie, for taking the time. I see the great vista over North County Dublin there behind you. Anne-Marie, as well as being the Fingal County Chief Executive, also heads up the subgroup within the CCMA focused on business, enterprise, innovation, and urban and town economic renewal. So that's quite a mouthful, but obviously, you know, straight down the topics we've been talking about here today. Anne-Marie, we've had a great discussion. There were 2 panels, one focused on the culture and age-friendly town design, which you've just been listening to, and the other on just generally sustainable urban centres. And we've certainly we've heard some sound bites that will be music to your ears, such as retaking our towns from cars, comments about the beauty of some of our city and town centre streets that people don't see for all the clutter and traffic and everything else. We've heard a lot about partnerships, spaces where everyone's welcome. We've heard about playful cities and lovely projects from Ennis around drain art, which is really fascinating. And the one that was most telling from me, you may have heard from Aaron Copeland, is that we're locking up our children as a response to traffic, which is a terrible place to find ourselves. So as the main purpose of this is to launch our New Places Matter guide, and also a book we've been working with the RIAI on, always getting that wrong, on top 10 tips for designing outdoor urban spaces. So we're delighted that you've been able to take a little bit of time out of your day to just, you know, contribute a few thoughts from yourself in this really important area. Over to you, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. And it is pretty dark in Swords today, but hopeful that the weather might change, because we in Fingal are busy rolling out some of the initiatives that you've been speaking about this afternoon. As Ian mentioned, I am here to represent the City and County Managers Association. And right across the country, there's been a lot of work done to prepare for summer 2021. But more importantly, I suppose, and it's not unusual for Chambers Ireland to be right on point, and I suppose the timely release of Places Matter is exactly the agenda that we're all working to. And some of that is about summer 2021, but more of it is about how do we want to use our town centres from here on in. Obviously, COVID brought a lot of negatives to and changed the way we all worked. But there's been so many positives. And I think the fact that people have been working from home and very often for the first time, I suppose, spending real quality time in their local areas, in their local towns and villages. It's really evident to us at a local government level that places matter. And because of that, I suppose we've had to ramp up our work in all of our towns and villages, trying to cope with the increased demands on all of the services. And it has been challenging. But one thing we've learned from COVID is partnership. You know, we worked on many initiatives throughout COVID, whether it was reacting to the crisis, changing how we worked because of the crisis, or looking for survival, I suppose, indeed, that we needed to work with other partners, the likes of chambers of commerce, directly working with businesses as well, the local communities, volunteers. So I think we've developed a new model, and which is about collaboration, and that was mentioned earlier today as well. If you collaborate to get things done, I suppose you can also collaborate to plan and to change how things are happening in our towns and villages. The other thing we realise is that the number of codependencies, you know, that none of us are in control of everything we do, and we need to work with others. And that's very clear when you're introducing change as to how towns and villages function, that you need to work with your local communities, and you need to work with your local businesses and stakeholder groups. And you know, sometimes there's disagreement amongst all the stakeholders, and particularly when you're introducing change. When you're trying to come up with a new way of living, I think the consultation is really, really key. But ultimately, it's about compromise, probably by everybody, you know, so that you can look to remove cars from your town centres, where I suppose the initial reaction might be that this is just inconvenient, you know, this is not going to work, and it's an element of trialing it to try and see whether you can overcome the objections to it. I suppose mentioning summer 2021, and I know the plan from government is to be announced next week in terms of exactly what will happen in June, July and August. But there will be a need for activation measures, you know, as our businesses reopen, maybe not in a way that allows them function as normal, but where they are relying on getting trading again. There is a need for activation measures in our town centres, and that is around increased pedestrianisation. It's around using car parking spaces for trading, you know, bringing in those parklets that were mentioned earlier, looking at licensing space to businesses. And it isn't only about hospitality. You know, we have to bear in mind that there's a lot of traders on most of our high streets. So we need to be coming up with a holistic plan for the area that will, I suppose, be to the benefit of everybody. I think it was Aaron mentioned the importance about bringing families into town centres, and that has been really evident over the last couple of months, where I suppose there's been an abundance of congregation, let's call it, and sometimes with, I suppose, causing difficulties for those that live there and causing difficulties for business and increased litter, increased noise, I suppose, to some extent. So I suppose in order to address that, I think the answer is bringing families back into town centres, and some really good ideas presented by Aaron as to how you attract the children, and then perhaps the adults will come with them. The summer 2021 plan is about all of those things. It's about making our town centres a better place to be, so attracting people into the town centres, making it easier for businesses to trade, making it easier for communities to shop safely, and think safe, think outdoors is very much the theme for the summer. But with that will require a management of those outdoor spaces, and local authorities clearly have a big role there. But we're working in Fingal with local businesses as well, because they do have a responsibility if they're using outdoors, that the space is managed in a way that that trade can happen while looking after the local residents, and to make sure that there's no inconvenience, or at least, whereas it's a different way of their town centre operating, that it's something that is acceptable to local communities. This year has been transformational in terms of active travel, I suppose, being prioritised by government. 240 million allocated to active travel measures right throughout the country. That's to do with walking and cycling in our towns and villages, as much as it is to do with the development of new greenways, which in themselves will be attractions to the public and to locals to travel to an area. I think all of our local authorities have prioritised active travel accordingly, and there's going to be investment in each and every county on active travel measures. But that's, I suppose, the intention there is that somebody leaves their house and wants to go to the town centre, and they walk or they cycle, or at the very least, they park on the outskirts of towns and stride to, so the walk and stride principle, where they leave the car at a certain distance and then walk and don't congest the town centre. So many works going on right across the country in that arena. COVID has given us very much the reason to move these things ahead quickly, and has given us an opportunity to introduce change quickly, and it's been warmly embraced by almost everybody. But we need to move to make some of these changes permanent. And I do think there's a need, to move away from the temporary interventions that we've relied on during summer 2020 and now again in summer 21, and move towards, some real investments in our town centres, permanent public realm improvements, looking at the health check of every town centre. And that's really moving now to a government strategy called Town Centre First, which local government is working on with government, but also it's very much going to be a partnership approach, where there'll be local town partnerships looking at their town and deciding how you can make that town centre a place that is attractive to live in and attractive to do business in, and I suppose to invigorate, the businesses. Not an easy thing to do coming out of COVID, as we want to see our businesses reopen, and we completely understand the challenges they face. So I think there will be a health check for all of us come the year end, just to see exactly how our town centres are going to function. And I mentioned activation measures earlier. I think there's more we can do with public buildings to make them, attractive, whether it's through lighting or whether it's through mini events being held in our public spaces. I look at the nighttime economy and how that works, and whether there's space there for, I suppose, more variety in the nighttime offer, and public buildings will be playing a part in that as well. The Town Centre First, I suppose, is a medium to long-term strategy, but building on our experience over the last year, building on, I suppose, the likes of Places Matter and some of the pilot projects that have already been tried throughout the country. Getting people living back in town centres, using that vacant space that exists in many of our town centres, whether it's over the shop or not, making it attractive, I think is part of those public realm improvements, part of those, maybe perhaps some incentive. We need to incentivise it a little bit in order to have people look at redeveloping existing buildings, rather than always looking for the new property in terms of acquiring a first home, for example. How we can work together and how that partnership will develop is important, and I think there is some consideration as to whether that needs to be coordinated. Certainly successful nighttime economies have business coordinators that focus on the nighttime activities. Town centres that have developed successful partnerships have looked to have a coordinator role permanently available for that purpose. So that's some of the ideas that are coming forward in the Town Centre first work that's happened already. And I think the intention is to launch a strategy mid-year towards autumn, and that'll be coming from government in due course. So it's an exciting time, although just to acknowledge again the challenging time that businesses have. Local authorities are determined to be there to support businesses as they reopen and get back trading in what I suppose we're all calling a new normal. So we don't want to be found wanting in that space. And again, open communication and availability to discuss the problems as well as the successes, I think, is key to that. And that's part of my work as chair of the business committee with the CCMA. So listen, thank you so much for inviting me today. Really pleased to be here. And also very happy to hear some of the successes up to now and to learn. There's lots we can learn from each other. And that's certainly something that I'll be bringing back to the business committee as well. So thanks, Ian, and thanks everybody, and a really good event today.
Great, Anne-Marie. Thanks a million for taking the time to join us. And as you say, lots of challenges, but you really feel there's a fresh impetus at the moment. COVID has helped the government focus on town centre initiatives. We look forward to seeing the plan. It's really important for our work around the country as well. So thanks very much indeed for taking the time. And thanks also, I think probably more than ever, with so many of us working from home, I think we're getting much greater appreciation for what our local authorities are doing for us in our home environments that we typically only saw at weekends, what's happening day by day. So thank you to, and all your colleagues for everything you're seeking to achieve and have achieved so far, and yeah, we're here to work with you on it. So with that, I want to close down the event. I want to thank Ken and Kenny for running two great sessions, and thank all the contributors and all the questions coming in and everything. As I said, we've an email address set up, sustainabletowns@chambers.ie, so keep sending your ideas and thoughts in there. We look forward to hearing from it. Hashtag Places Matter if you want to get engaged on Twitter, as most of you have already done. And with that, I'm going to close it down for the day. Thank you so much, and I hope the assets we're bringing you are really valuable to you. Thank you.